Well, Eric Cantor, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Well, a lot of people are wondering whether or not the government was going to shut down. It appears that, at least on your side of things in the House yesterday, by an overwhelming vote, you decided not to do that by giving a 2-week extension.
And that's true. Gretchen, we've taken the first step, I think, to doing what most Americans are doing, is trying to tighten the belt, do more with less. And we're told that today the Senate is actually going to act this morning to avoid a government shutdown, but yet cut spending. And that's what we're trying to do here.
Okay, so for 2 weeks, we got the money for Uncle Sam to write checks and everything like that. But then there's going to be a gigantic battle because the Democrats do not want to cut as much as a lot of House Republicans do.
Well, Steve, you're right. That's been pretty clear. But it's interesting that, Harry Reid really, up until yesterday, had been unwilling to go along with these cuts. But the White House sort of arrived at the scene very late. Yesterday, I talked to the White House Chief of Staff. He'd indicated that they would have gone along with 4 weeks of cuts at this rate, which, again, is the rate that we had originally proposed in the House, bringing spending down to 2008 levels. But you're right. We're going to have to come to grips with the fact that Republicans, like most Americans, want to see government spending cut. And we're going to continue to insist on that. We don't want to shut the government down, but we want to cut spending.
All right, so what you did is $4 billion, and you got some bipartisan support out of the House. Let's say it passed the Senate, and the president's in support. After all, the $4 billion in cuts is really something he proposed in his budget, so not hard decisions. Are you going to try to get the $61 billion passed and immediately then together work towards entitlements?
Well, Brian, what we're doing is obviously we got to resolve this fiscal year, which is where the $61 billion figure comes from, lowering levels to 2008. What we'll do on entitlements is we're expecting our Budget Committee Chairman Paul Ryan and his committee to produce a budget towards the end of this month, the beginning of April. And within that budget, we'll have a 10-year lookout, and we will include in that budget document our vision for entitlement reform. We'll also be talking about tax reform and the way we can begin to grow this economy and put Americans back to work.
Well, maybe Senator Kent Conrad, then Democrat from North Dakota, will like what he sees in your budget plan, because he seems to be frustrated right now. Let's listen to him.
We have a $14 trillion debt, and the focus is on a $4 billion spending cut or a $61 billion spending cut. Hello? What's wrong with this picture?
And I've sort of been echoing that this morning, Congressman, because I feel like a lot of the American public is really fed up that we just can't get the job done. And are we really attacking the biggest problem at hand, which is the deficit?
Well, Gretchen, you're right. That's why you're sort of in disbelief as to why Harry Reid took so long to at least agree to $4 billion of cuts, given the fact that we have the kind of deficit we're facing. And that's why it's so important that we in the House are going to take this step towards putting our vision out there about entitlements. The president unveiled his budget a couple of weeks ago and refused to deal with it. And look, it's time to be honest with the American people. We can't keep spending money the way we're spending it. Nearly 40 cents of every dollar we're spending is borrowed. Nobody can sustain that kind of fiscal activity. That's why we're trying to get the fiscal house in order, both in the short term and project out long term, so that we can remove the uncertainty and see some economic growth.
And of course, if the two sides can't get together, there could be a government shutdown. I was reading in the Washington Post this morning, Congressman, that some Democrats worry that if there was a shutdown that barely affected the everyday lives of a lot of people, that would reinforce your argument on the conservative side that a lot of government is wasteful and they don't really need that gigantic a mechanism.
Well, Steve, if you saw yesterday, the GAO released a report again that showed billions of dollars of going to waste here. These are taxpayer dollars. There are duplicative and wasteful programs. There are so many of that. And unfortunately, the GAO had issued a similar report in 2001 with the same kind of information. What we're talking about here in this Congress, Republicans are going to take action. We are going to insist finally to change this culture and get rid of that waste.
Right.
And I think most Americans understand that's what we got to do.
Now, Congressman, let me ask you something. There's a lot of people, economists like Mark Sandy and company, will say, wait a second, if growth is your major concern, too much in cutting could hurt that growth. Do you agree with that school of thought at all? If you cut too much, you could trip up things and hurt yourself in terms of growth?
Well, I think the obvious response to Mark Zandi is he was a big proponent of the nearly $800 billion stimulus bill, and the promises made there were absolutely not kept. And I think you can sort of dismiss that prediction that way. But look, we had the chairman of the Federal Reserve yesterday indicate that the cuts that we were proposing, $61 billion off of the 2010 levels, were not going to in any way significantly reduce the prospects for growth. Again, that is, I think, testament to the fact that we're heading in the right direction. We're trying to cut spending so we can create an environment for private sector job growth.
Well, I hope that members of Congress will take that GAO report to heart this time around, because this is the first time hearing that they did the same thing in 2001, and it's hopefully they're going to be serious about it this time. Eric Cantor, Congressman from Virginia, always great to see you. Thank you so much.
Good to be on. Thanks.